All right, let's go ahead and create a semi-truck now. Before we do that, we're going to select all of our layers that make up our tree, and then we're going to go ahead and put those into a folder. Then we're going to turn that off so it's out of our way. All right, so the first thing we want to do with our semi-truck is build the body. So starting on my layer with my cube, I'm going to go ahead and make a copy of that. And then I'm going to take that copy and drag it over like so, and I'm going to shrink it down. About there should be good. You can make it whatever size you'd like. And I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. Perfect. Next, we're going to make a copy of this layer, and then we'll drag that over. We want it to be behind that box, and this is going to be the back part of our semi-truck. So this will be the front, this will be the back. Now we want this to be higher than the front part of our semi-truck, so we're going to put it about there. Then we're going to go ahead and make a copy of that and drag that underneath and move it back like so. And this is going to be the back half of our semi-truck. Let's zoom in there, and using our arrow keys on our keyboard, we can go ahead and nudge that in and up and over until we get it lined up perfectly. Great. Next, what we want to do is we want to make the bottom part of our semi-truck back, and this is where the wheels are going to be attached. So let's go ahead and merge these two cubes together. So I'm going to select both those and merge. So now those are one layer. And then I'm going to make a copy of that layer and drag it underneath. So now I have a second one underneath there. And with this layer, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shrink it down using my transform tool. And as I shrink it, I'm going to hold down Shift and Alt to keep its proportions and to keep it centered. So I'll shrink it down to about there. I'll hit enter. And then I'm going to nudge that up using my arrow keys. So I'll nudge it up to about that point. Perfect. Next, we're going to add in some detail on the front part of our truck. So let's zoom in there. And what we're going to do is we're going to come down to this original cube, make a copy of that layer, and drag it out like so. And we want it to be at the very top of all our other ones. And then we're going to shrink that down using our transform tool, and we'll shrink it down to about that size should be good. Maybe just the tiniest bit larger, about there. Then we'll hit enter. Next, let's go ahead and make a copy of that, and we'll drag that over like so, get it lined up, and we want to pull it underneath that one, and then we want to get rid of that little gap in there. Great. Now let's make one more copy of that. So Control J, we'll drag that one over, get it lined up, and then we'll drag it underneath, push it into place with our arrow keys. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and take all these layers and merge them together. So now that's all one layer. Next, we want to center this long cube within this bigger cube. So right now we're a little off-centered, and you can tell because the distance between here and here and the distance between there and there is different. So we need it to go more this way. So I'm just going to take my arrow keys and I'll nudge that over like so. But as I nudge it over, it's not really going to be moving diagonally. It's going to be moving horizontally. And so I need to also push it up with my arrow keys to get it back towards the back. So something like so should work. Then let's go ahead and make a copy of this layer. And we'll go ahead and move that in. And we want this one to be in front the way it is now. Then using my transform tool, I'll go ahead and shrink that down to about that size. Hit enter. And then I'm going to move that over into place like so. And we want it to line up just like that. Then we're going to go ahead and make a copy of that and drag it over to the other edge. And then we need to drag that layer underneath. And we want to make sure that this edge over here gets lined up. Perfect. All right, so now we have the top piece of our semi-truck. Next, we want to add a side view mirror. So I'm going to go ahead and make a copy of this cube down here. And then I'm going to go ahead and drag that out like so. And then I'm going to shrink that down. So we want it to be pretty small. So somewhere around this size. We're going to put it about in the middle of our cube on this side. So somewhere about there should be good. Then let's go ahead and make another copy of this, and we're going to drag it over like so. And then we can merge those two layers together. So now those are one layer. Lastly, we want to go ahead and add the wheels in on our semi-truck. So before we do that, I'm going to nudge this whole thing down just a little bit more. So I'm going to select all of my layers, and then I'm going to use my arrow keys to push it down, just like so. I want it to be a little bit closer so the wheels can touch the ground more easily. Then I'm also going to push this back part of the semi-truck a little bit closer towards this cube. So I'm going to select everything that's a part of that back part of the semi-truck. So both those, and I'll move them both in like so, and a little bit more down, because we want to make sure that this bottom part of the semi-truck and this bottom part line up. Now let's go ahead and add in those wheels. So there's going to be one wheel on this front part and two wheels on this back part. So I'm going to come down to my cube, make a copy, and drag that out. And we want to shrink this down. Pretty dang small, so somewhere around there. That'll be about the size of our tire. And then we want the bottom of our tire to line up with this horizontal line right here. So let's go ahead and hit enter and get that lined up. Great. Now let's go ahead and copy this layer and move it over like so. We want to try to get the same distance between here and here as there is over here. So right about there looks good. Next, let's go ahead and use our arrow keys to push that up so it lines up with this diagonal line. And then let's go ahead and make one last copy of this layer. And we're going to drag it over here like so. We want it to be a little bit towards the back. So about there should be good. Perfect. Now we want to merge these shapes together so they're all one shape. So with this guy that we just placed, we're going to go ahead and drag this small cube we just placed up towards our main body piece, and we'll select both those and merge them together. So now those are one layer. Now we have a cube turned on back here that we're using to copy from, so I'm going to turn that off so you can see what I'm doing. So now that's all one layer right there. Next, we need to merge the bottom part of our back part of the semi-truck with the wheels. So I'm going to go ahead and select all those layers and merge them. And then we can turn that off, and you'll see that's all one layer now. Now, lastly, what we want to do is we want to add in our shadows. So we're going to have a cast shadow on this bottom part right here from the top part of our semi-truck, and we're also going to have a cast shadow on the ground. So let's go ahead and create those. So first, let's create the cast shadow from our semi-truck. So I'm going to go ahead and select the shape of that layer. Then I'm going to add a new layer underneath it and fill it in with the color black. Next, let's go ahead and nudge that down using our arrow keys. So we'll nudge it down to about there. Now, a good thing to make note about is that this corner right here doesn't line up with that one, but when the shadow is being cast on it, it needs to line up with this bottom corner. So I'm going to go ahead and grab it and move it over so that corner lines up with the bottom corner. And now we can go ahead and right click our layer and convert it into a clipping mask so it gets clipped off over here. And then we'll bring down our opacity to 25%. Perfect. Now there should be cast shadows on these wheels, but because they're going to be solid black, you won't see them anyways, so we're not going to worry about them. Next, let's add that cast shadow on the ground, being cast from the entire truck. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down below all my layers and add a new layer. Then using my lasso tool, I'm going to go ahead and draw a shape straight down from this line, like so. And this is just to make sure that I'm completely lined up and on the ground. So I want to be straight down from there. And then I'm going to come all the way down to here. And then I'll come all the way up to here and just guesstimating about where that's coming down from. I'll click there and then come straight up like so. And then we can reconnect that. And then we're going to fill that in with the color black. Now, this is incorrect over here and over here, so now we're going to fix that. The only reason why we went straight up, like I said, is to line up with where the truck is. Now we can go ahead and click from that corner and come all the way back, and we're trying to stay in line with this line right here, or also with any of these lines. So we just want to make sure that we're in line with those. Then we can go ahead and click, and we'll click around like this, and then we'll delete. Let's do the same thing over here. So we'll click there and trying to stay lined up with this line right here or with that line right there, just eyeballing it. So probably about there. And then we can go ahead and connect that and delete. Perfect. So now we have the ground shadow. Let's go ahead and turn the opacity down. Now, like I said before, the ground shadow is actually going to be darker than other shadows because the truck is so close to the ground. So we're going to leave it at 50%. All right, that brings us to the end of this lecture. So in this lecture, you learned how to build an entire semi-truck out of cubes. And then we were able to add the shadows and the ground shadow to that. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lecture where we're going to be coloring this truck. Okay, before we start adding color to this, we need to go ahead and merge some of these layers together so that they're one and we can paint right over them. So first, we're going to start with the very bottom. So we're going to start with this piece right here along with its shadow piece. So we're going to go ahead and merge those together. Next, we're going to merge our body piece together. So it's going to be this large cube with the rear view mirror. So I'm going to come up to that layer and find my rear view mirror layer and just merge those together. So now that's all one layer. And lastly, I want to merge this whole piece on top as one layer. So I'm going to select all of those and merge. So now that's all one layer. This is going to make it much easier to color our truck. All right, let's get started. So the first thing we want to do is add a new layer above this top piece. And on this new layer, we're going to convert it into a clipping mask. And then we're going to go ahead and fill that in with a blue. So I'm going to come into my blues, and somewhere about in here should be good, a little bit desaturated. I'm going to go ahead and fill that in. Next, I'm going to change my blend mode from normal to overlay. So now we get this really nice, cool shadow on the white part of our truck. Now, while we have this blue color selected, we're going to go ahead and paint this back part of our truck because we want it to be the same color. So I'm going to find the layer that has the back part of my truck on it, so right there. Then I'm going to add a new layer above that, create a clipping mask, fill that in, and then change the blend mode to overlay. Perfect. Next, let's add a little bit more detail to the back part of our truck. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my lasso tool. And then on a new layer above this blue layer, I'm going to go ahead and select a shape that goes right along this edge. And we're going to fill this in with a dark gray. Now you can come outside of this area because it's going to be a clipping mask. So just like so. Then I'm going to go ahead and fill that in with a black. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring the opacity down on that so that we can control how gray it is. Now we want to make this into a clipping mask, so that I'm going to drag the layer underneath the blue layer and then back up. And now we can go ahead and turn that opacity down on the layer until we like what we see. So I'm going to turn it down to about 15%, should be good. Now I'm going to copy this layer, and I want to make sure it's a clipping layer mask, so I'll drag it underneath, and then I can grab that and drag it all the way to the bottom, like so, and get it lined up. Perfect. Next, let's add some color to the body of our truck. So I'm going to come up to that layer, add a new layer above it, and turn it into a clipping layer mask. And then I'm going to fill that in with a red. So I'm going to come into my reds, and I don't want it to be completely saturated, but I want it to be pretty close. So somewhere about there should be good. Then I'll go ahead and fill that layer in, and then I'm going to change the blend mode from normal to multiply. Next, let's go ahead and add a window on this truck. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in there a little bit more. So using my lasso tool, I'm going to go ahead and select from here over to about there, and then I'm going to come straight up like so, and then I'm going to come over like so, just eyeballing, making sure that I'm on the same diagonal angle as the other parts. So probably to about there. And then I'm going to come straight across here and do the same thing. Just eyeball it, making sure that the distance between here and here is the same as here and here. So I'll go about there. And if you're unsure about it, what you can do is you can turn the opacity down on your truck, and then you'll be able to see the grid behind it. Alright, and then I'm not going to worry about this line down here because I'm not going to be able to eyeball that well enough, so I'm just going to come straight across like so and reconnect it. Then I'm going to fill that in with black, so change the color to black and fill that in. Next, let's go ahead and switch back over to our lasso tool, and we're going to come across here like so. So that way we can figure out where that point needs to be on this corner. So now we know where that goes, and then we can come across here and just eyeballing in where it should be, So I'm going to say somewhere about there. And then we can go ahead and come across, reconnect, and fill that in. Now I'm getting this little red line here because I did this on top of my red layer. So what I can do is I can go ahead and take my brush and just fill that in. Great. Let's go ahead and zoom out and see how that looks. Awesome. So we're going to create our tire on a new layer, and then we're going to use the transform tool to morph it to the correct perspective. So I'll add a new layer above this, and using my marquee tool, I'm going to go ahead and make a square selection like so, and then I'm going to fill that in with black. Next, I'm going to go ahead and select this shadow dark color right here, that's sort of blue, and I'm going to add a new layer above this and fill this square in. And then using my transform tool, I can go ahead and shrink that down, and also holding down Shift and Alt to keep the proportions and keep it centered, I'll shrink it down to about there. I'll hit enter. And now let's merge both these layers together. That's going to be our tire. So let's make a copy of this layer so we have a backup one. And then I'm going to drag this guy over like so, and I'm going to zoom in there. Next, let's turn that transform tool on, right click, and come to distort. And then what we want to do is we just want to drag this wheel right up to each corner and straight up this way. And then we'll drag that guy there. And let's just get him into the basic position, and then we can figure out how we're going to get him straight and correct according to our perspective. If you have your snap to turned on, it should snap right into the correct shape. If it doesn't, what you need to do is come up to View and then come down to Snap to and make sure you have Guides, Layers, and Document Bounds checked. Next, let's go ahead and hit Enter. Next, we want to grab this layer and drag it down towards our red layer, and we're going to drag it underneath, and then we're going to drag it above it. So now it's a clipping layer mask for that. Now you see it didn't fit perfectly, so what we're going to do is we're going to turn on our transform tool and just barely nudge that over like so, so it fits in there. Next, what we want to do is we want to fill in this area right here with black also. So I'm going to zoom in there, and using my lasso tool, I'm going to go ahead and select along this edge like so, and then I'm going to fill that in with black. Perfect. See how that looks. Awesome. Now let's go ahead and make a copy of this layer. Then we're going to drag that layer down to the bottom part of our truck. So that's that layer right there. And we're going to convert this into a clipping mask. So we'll right click and come to clipping mask. And then we want to drag that over just like so and get that all lined up correctly. So about there looks good. Maybe up one. Perfect. Then we're going to make another copy of this. So we'll hit Control J, drag that underneath so it becomes a clipping layer mask, and then we can drag that over here and get it all lined up also. Alright, that looks good. Next, we're going to add some color to the bottom part of our truck, and we're just going to add a little bit of gray. So I'm going to create a new layer above this, and it'll automatically become a clipping layer mask. And then I'm going to go ahead and fill that in with a darker gray like so. So I'll fill that in and change it to a multiply layer. And then I can go ahead and play with that opacity to change how dark that gray is. And I think I like it pretty dark, so maybe just a little bit lighter. So about there. Perfect. Now we can go ahead and turn this wheel layer off. So I'm going to find that, turn it off, and then I'm going to find this bottom cube and I'm going to turn that off. And then we can turn our tree back on. See how that looks with it. And that tree might be a little bit too large, so we can go ahead and grab that folder and shrink all of those layers down like so. And that looks like it'll fit much better. And then we can come down to our background layer, and we can go ahead and add a new layer above that and fill it in with gray. Very cool. I'm going to move this tree out of the way so it's not so much in the way. So maybe to right here. Awesome. Alright, that brings us to the end of this project. I hope you enjoyed this project. I did. I really like the look of these type of graphics. Now, your assignment for this lecture is to create this project, but I want you to change it up. I want you to change the color, maybe change the shape of the window, change the design on the back, change the design on the tree, change the shape of the tree, maybe even change the shape of the truck. Just change it up, and then once you create your Crossy Road graphics, I want you to post it to the Q&A section of the course. Thanks for watching, and I really look forward to seeing your artwork.